it's 2024 and you're trying to buy a house and you're having a hard time. These are my top 3 tips. This is the extra special stuff that you need to know to make sure your offer gets accepted and not looked over. Those 3 things set your offer apart and go above and beyond what your normal agent does. First thing, escalation clauses. Now, not everybody knows about this, and this is why these are my top tier tips. Only from my best people do I talk about this. An escalation clause is kind of like an eBay auction, where you're telling the seller you're going to offer $300, but you'll go to $330. Now, again, this is specific to Illinois. There's other markets where agents laugh at a limit, okay? But when I'm working with people, I want to make sure that I'm responsible and I'm managing their money in a way that's responsible. Let's face it, the buyer wants to buy the house and they have a lot of money. My job is to get them that house as economically as possible. We're not here to spend all the buyer's money if we don't have to, right? So an escalation clause is a way of telling the seller, hey, I'll give you more money if you had another offer that's better than mine. Okay, so in a scenario where a home's listed at $300, you'd want to start maybe at like $305 or $310 and say, I'll give you $2,000 more than any other offer up to $330. And you get a chance to outbid somebody else silently. Now keep in mind that all the offers are confidential. So when a seller receives these offers, you're not going to hear from the seller says, well, I got an offer that's $315, I got an offer that's $318, I got an offer at $320. You're going to hear the offer that I have is $320. You're willing to go as high as $322. Is that right? Understanding the whole situation with the escalation clause. Escalation clauses need to have verification. That way a seller just doesn't take advantage of a buyer. But that's something that gets worked out between the agents. An escalation clause is a tool that you can use to make sure you're successful when you're making an offer on a home in a very competitive market like we are in today. Tip number 2, this is extremely advanced, only for the best qualified buyers. An appraisal gap waiver. An appraisal gap waiver means if there's a shortfall in the appraisal, I'll cover a fixed amount. Sometimes people will cover it all together, but most of the time we're going to say, if the appraisal falls short below the offer price that we offered, we'll cover X amount of dollars. So let's put some numbers to this. The house is listed for $300. You're using an escalation clause. You'll go up to $330. You'll tell the seller that you'll cover any shortfall in the appraisal up to $5,000. And what this means is your offer is $330 and the appraisal comes in at $320. Normally, we would get the seller to come down to $320. But because you're different and you want to make sure you get the house instead of the other person, then you're going to give them $5,000 more than the appraisal. You're closing that $10,000 gap by offering them that $5,000. That makes your offer stand out more than the other offers. The bigger the number, the more risk, but you get a better reward. You get the house that you're looking for. Tip number 3, this one's really pretty basic. It's the as-is clause. What this means is in our contract we have a clause that says the buyer will buy the home in as-is condition. They're not going to ask for any repairs. A lot of times in a market that's more neutral or tilted more towards the buyer, they'll ask for a lot of repairs. In an as-is clause, they'll say that we're not going to ask for anything. We're not going to nickel and dime the seller. But the reality is, if there's something significantly wrong, you'll still do an inspection and those things will present themselves. And then you have the choice as a buyer to walk away or say, oh, well, the home has radon, so we'd ask the seller to mitigate that. A lot of times that's how it works. It's not truly as is, but it is. You're not asking for window seals. You're not asking for GFCIs to be replaced. You're not asking for things that you normally would or things that are low cost. You're asking for a big ticket item because at the end of the day, as a buyer, when you're looking at these houses, if you're willing to take on those expenses, that's perfect. That's exactly what you want. You want to tell the seller that you're willing to buy this house regardless of the condition. Because when you walk through the house, when you first time to go in it, you kind of have a good idea of the condition of the house. In a situation like radon, where it's bad enough that the seller has to fix it for a second buyer, why not get the seller to fix it for you? So that's kind of how that works. As is clause. To recap, you've got an escalation clause, you've got the appraisal gap waiver, and you got the as is clause. Those 3 things set your offer apart and go above and beyond what your normal agent does. If you haven't heard about those things, we need to talk. Maybe you need a different perspective. I'm James Tiernan from the Tiernan Group at Keller Williams North Shore West, your guide to real estate.